Mr. Ali,
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Let's start. We've got quite
Yes,
a
sir,
few.
I think we can start.
आप करेंगे sir?
Okay, sir, I will start. So good morning to all the respected participants, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all on behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management of training program on disaster risk reduction of museums. This program is being currently organized by NIDM and INTEC Heritage Academy. So I would like to call Dr. Naveen Piplani for recapitulation of first day and start the program. Over to you, sir.
Good morning and welcome again to this disaster risk management program for museums. I'm very happy that so many of you joined yesterday. Over 50, 60 participants we had yesterday, just about 70 plus, and even today. One thing I noticed that, and I would request all of you to please do it, that go to the chat and put your full name, full designation, and organization that you belong to. I was just going through it yesterday and today. There are a lot of people from museums, and I saw also people from panchayats and other organization, disaster management organizations. What I propose to do is that at some point, whenever we get time, either today or tomorrow, whoever is there to give you about 30 seconds or 40 seconds to just unmute yourself and put your video on and tell us very quickly about yourself in just half a minute, so that we know who all is listening to this workshop and what really has been the feedback, and to carry it forward with all of you. So let's say if there are 10 people from museology or different museums, we can form a small group of these 10-15 people, and we can send a proposal to NIDM that this particular group will continue to work in this direction and take the learnings from this workshop forward in their own institutions, with the help and support of INTEC and the ministry. And we can continue to have these Zoom meetings and take this workshop forward to some logical conclusion rather than just listening and going away. Let's say we prepare 1 or 2 page, if not more, just a 2-page document of what is the current status of risk preparedness in the museum that you come from. And you can take, let's say, 2 weeks time to do it. And then we can meet in late December or mid-January again and say that as a part of this workshop, these are the learnings that we had, and we have this 2-page status report on the museum or the organization or the city or the institute or the office that you people belong to. And we can submit that whole report as a compilation to NIDM and say that, look, this is the state of museums in the country today, right? So the next workshop should build upon that status report and go forward from there and identify the areas where museums actually require help and assistance in disaster risk preparedness. On ground, not theoretically, on ground. And then we can approach NIDM and INTAC to develop 3-day or a 5-day capacity building programs for these museums on site.
15,000 tickets.
We go to those museums physically and understand what the problems are and present a risk preparedness report in the 3 days that we are there, so that the museum kind of gains from this collaboration. And in the next 1 year, let's say 2022, we give a consolidated proposal to NIDM for, let's say, 1 crore, 2 crore, or something like that, or maybe 20 crores, and say that this kind of money is required for building the capacity of 100 museums in the country for preparing against any disasters. So in 2023, when we would have completed 75 years of India's independence, and this Mahotsav, Azadi Ka Mahotsav, which is going on, NIDM will be able to present to PMO and the Parliament a report of 100 museums, getting updated in terms of risk preparedness as a tangible outcome of this one particular workshop. Now, why I am saying this is that if you've got 70 to 100 people listening, that should be able to change the scenario of museums in the country. This is not a theoretical lecture class where you are students and you are making notes. That's not, we are all experts. And we should be able to help the Government of India, help the ministry in taking some tangible steps forward in the protection of these museums. So if in the first year, with the support of, let's say, 2 to 5 crores from the ministry, which is not a very big amount, we consolidate a status report of 100 museums in the country, which we present to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs. This is the status at the Azadi Ka Mahotsav, and to be able to continue to safeguard the national identity, the national pride of the country, which is in the museums. We need another 500 crores for next 3 years to actually equip our museums with all these risk preparedness equipments and technology and personnel and drills and etc. So it becomes a long-term program to safeguard the museums. And we know that 2 museums are going to come up in the North Block and South Block in 2024. We should aim to make them already risk prepared through part of these workshops. So therefore, it is very important that all of you who are attending the workshop, please put your full name, full designation, and the organization in the chat box so that we are able to contact you when this idea, which I would request Mr. Ali Haider to take forward with the concerned officials in the department, not necessarily today or tomorrow, but as and when you get the opportunity. But we should have the contact addresses, otherwise we will not be able to get in touch with you. Now, coming back to what happened yesterday. Yesterday was a very interesting session with Mr. Pran Ranjan, who we have invited again today, because he is the person who's got the maximum experience and expertise, let's say, amongst all of us. And he has a very good network. And that reminds me, from network, there is a network of International Council on Museums. It is called ICOM. It is an international network. And we should also involve them in our efforts towards safeguarding risk preparedness for museums. We should get a network of all national and state archives and museums together at the next level. So he talked about the various measures for understanding what kind of risks may be there for them. You see, museum is not a building, as I said yesterday. Museum is, if you got, let's say, 2000 years old little object, that object has a lot of history. That object has a lot of messages. That object has the whole idea of craftsmanship, the design, the philosophy, the lifestyle. It's a whole document, a historical document in itself. So to keep it properly, to understand it properly, to analyze it properly, to protect it properly, to make sure that the object stays for the future generations, it is a responsibility of our museum curators and caretakers. In the constitutional amendment 52A and 52B, the constitution makes it a duty of every citizen of India to safeguard and protect the cultural legacy and the cultural heritage of India. And the immovable heritage, which is the museum objects, is very much a part of that legacy. So I would urge all museum curators and museum caretakers to be very serious about this. You're sitting on the treasure that has been given to us from past 2000, 3000 years to be taken forward. So no compromise, no leniency, no negligence, no ignorance, no, how can you say, no level of mistake is acceptable in the safeguarding and taking care of our museum objects, because they are not ours. They have been handed over from our forefathers for the future generations. And we are only the caretakers. We are only the chokidars of those. So let's understand that role, that we play a very important role in this sector. And therefore, I cannot thank enough NIDM and the initiative that they have taken in this direction, that it is so important. Imagine a whole museum getting lost in the fire. Can you even imagine the damage that it would have caused? Not in terms of the building, but in terms of the collections. The damages the fires that have taken place in the UK and recently in the South America, Mexico, where the entire museums, they disappeared overnight, and all the collection disappeared overnight. So this has to be taken very seriously. I'm very serious about it. I mean, I don't consider it as a one-off workshop. I see it as a starting point of at least 500 to 1,000 crore investment in the museums over the next 3 or 4 years to really make them disaster-proof, and all the efforts for recovery to be put in place. So it's not enough that you have a little fire cylinder and say that, look, if there is a fire, I'm going to extinguish it with that, so I'm prepared. Nobody's going to stay inside the museum when it is on fire. The first person to run out is the person who you have identified to take that cylinder. Nobody's going to put the life at risk. So one cylinder sitting in one corner is not going to save your museum, right? So you have to have several layers of protection. If one of them fails, what do you do next? Second one fails, what do you do next? Third one fails, what do you do next? How do you make it fireproof externally? How do you make it fireproof internally? How do you make it earthquake-proof? How do you make it flood-proof? How do you make it any proof in case of theft, in case of attack, in case of seizure, in case of so many things? Because everybody is targeting the cultural identity. Destroy the cultural identity. Look what is happening in Afghanistan. Destroy the cultural identity and the nation will fall apart. So we have to safeguard cultural identity in every possible way. And this is the workshop where it all begins. So we have to really, from our heart, from our, with full intention, we have to almost dedicate ourselves to safeguarding the cultural legacy and the cultural identity of India as a nation. And this can only be done when we start taking these small steps, as Mr. Pran Ranjan told us yesterday. And we have requested him again to show us some examples, so that practical always is much better than theory. We had a theory yesterday. Now, with that note, I would request Ms. Smita to take in charge of the technical session. We will have a technical session, then we'll have Mr. Pran Ranjan, then we'll have Professor Santosh Kumar, who's going to speak to us today. Then we'll have a little Q&A session. But tomorrow, if possible, because I do several other things, so I may get busy. But please make sure you spend at least 15-20 minutes. Open up your video cameras, unmute yourself, say a few words. What do you think? How will you take the learning from this workshop forward? And would you volunteer your time? Would you contribute towards making a 2-page document over the next 15 days to be submitted to NIDM on the status of your museum in the context of risk preparedness, and what this workshop has kind of shared with you, told you. With that, I hand over to Smita. And enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Piplani. I hope I'm audible. And so a very warm welcome to everybody today in this workshop again. And it's a very, we have a lot of interesting lectures lined up today. So I really hope that you make the most of it today. And so now we have Mr. Ruknuddin Mirza, who is the Assistant Director at Architectural Heritage Division at INTAC office. And he graduated from School of Planning and Architecture in 2007, and he is currently working at INTAC, and he has a vast experience in restoration and conservation of architectural heritage, and also disaster risk reduction of monuments. So today he will speak to us about immediate response to disasters in cultural heritage sites, and he will present the basics about on this topic, and a very interesting kind of presentation is coming your way by him, although he's not going to be here. So we are sorry about that because he had some commitments, but we are happy to bring you his recorded lecture today, and whatever doubts you have about this lecture, you can ask tomorrow. Actually, we have Mr. Divai Gupta from the same division, Architectural Heritage Division, INTAC. So he might answer your questions, but we would love to hear your questions today. If you have any questions, please make sure to put them in the chat box. We will make sure that your questions are answered very shortly. And so I will just start with his presentation. Kindly bear with me till I make sure if it is properly audible and visible to you. Thank you. Is this audible and visible?
Smita, it's visible.
Stabilize and reduce the risk.
Is it audible?
Yeah, it's audible.
All right,
We
great.
can
Thank
start
you.
from the beginning. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ruknuddin Birla, Assistant Director from Architectural Heritage Division. So the presentation is on immediate response to disasters in cultural heritage site. First of all, we need to understand what is basically the immediate response or first aid is to a cultural heritage site. So it is the immediate and interdependent action which has to be taken to stabilize and reduce the risk of the site which is in danger due to some kind of emergency, due to some kind of natural calamity or any man-made disaster. So the first aid or the immediate response would involve the analysis of an emergency situation and its likely effect. Secondly, it has to be an on-site damage and risk assessment, which means to say what are the damage that have happened and what kind of risk, further risk that is there, and its assessment. The third point is to provide security to the different artifacts or manuscripts or even the architectural elements that have that are in a risk of being pilfered, and further stabilizing the structure if there is a possibility that due to further secondary hazards, these elements or these structural components could fall off or could create, further there could be a situation when there's a possibility of further collapse of the building. So in this chart, you can see that there are 4 steps of response to a disaster. The first is situation analysis. The second is on-site damage and risk assessment. The third is security and stabilization. And the fourth is early recovery. All these things have to be done by following a scientific method, which involves documentation, risk management, communication and coordination. So we will discuss the first step now. It involves situation analysis. So we have to understand who would be the participants in a situation analysis. The team or institution implementing the first aid has to be a participant. The owner or the institution in charge of the affected cultural heritage site has to be part of that team. Representative from emergency management institutions like NIDM or NDRF, or they should be also a part of this team. And also those institutions like the government institutions, for instance, the district administration, or if the property belongs to a particular stakeholder like ASI, they should also be a part of it, because the control to access of the affected area and are in their with them, so they have to be also involved. And then the other participants could be representatives from local communities and volunteers and local NGOs. This is somewhat, this chart shows the workflow, and it involves collection of data, analysis of data, and then plan of action. So when we are doing this collection of information, following points have to be kept in mind. That is, context to the emergency, cultural heritage site affected, and identification of stakeholders and actors. So for that, a visual map has to be created, which could act as a tool to identify and understand the complex relationship between all the stakeholders. So let us understand this map. It is an example of this visual map that we were talking about. So in the center, we have this endangered cultural heritage. So, and there are different stakeholders and actors which are interacting with each other for this immediate response. So first, let's just understand the legend. So on the left-hand corner below, you have actor and stakeholder. So the single ring or the circle shows actor, and those concentric rings, two concentric rings show actor or stakeholders. Then in the second column, we have these color coding. The yellow shows local active society or community groups. The blue shows foreign assistance for cultural heritage and cultural heritage first aid, and the light blue shows government authorities. Then in the next column, we see the level of influence. If there is no circle at all around this around a certain stakeholder, so it means that the level of influence is very low. If the circle is not that dark or prominent, then it is medium, and of course, then if it is deep enough, as shown in the legend, then the influence is very high. And the next column tells us about the relationship between each stakeholder. So if it is dotted, it is weak. If it is firm but not deep, so it is moderate, and then strong. Now let us come back to the image. So in the center, it is the heritage site. Let us take the example of Jama Masjid. So on the top, you have two concentric layers, which is like there's the stakeholder as well as the actor. So it shows state body of antiquities. State body of antiquities. So for us, in our case, it would be ASI. So which is the nodal agency which is the authority in everything related to heritage. Then you have but the color coding shows that the level of influence at the site would be not very prominent during the disaster mitigation or immediate response. Then on the left, you have military. Military's level of influence would be high if there is a man-made disaster or something. But military could be also, replaced by the present body that we have in the form of NDRF, which takes which starts the immediate response. As the Government of India has created that body under India and under National Monument. Sorry, this body that we have, the National Disaster Relief Force. So, and then we have the deep blue color part, which is foreign cultural heritage first aiders or institutions. It could be UNESCO or any other body which can help in this response. Then we have religious board. In case of Jama Masjid, it would be Waqf board. And then we have local communities who would be residing around, and local heritage organizations and professions like INTAC. So let us understand the relationship between these institutions and how they are related to the heritage site also. So if you are talking about ASI, they have a very strong connection with local heritage organizations like INTAC, and then the local heritage organizations can also help a lot in giving response to such kind of a disaster. And if I take the example of this ASI, INTAC, and local community, so the local community can also interact a lot with the heritage consultants, and they have a very strong relationship with the heritage site. So then they can also work in collaboration, and they can be of great help for the retrieving of artifacts or doing immediate or taking part in the immediate response scenario. The religious board, and here it is the Waqf board. Waqf board will play a very important role because this structure is under their control, and so they have the control over access to the building, and they have the control to the property of the building. So when the first aiders are acting, so they would require a close coordination with the Waqf board. So this is how all the participants and you can see the NDRF would be acting or the police or any special force would be acting in coordination with the ASI and the religious boards. So let us understand who should be the stakeholder and who should be and what kind of help will we get from such a kind of map. So so the idea the point here is to understand how this stakeholder map or actor map will help us, what information or what assistance it would give us. So following are the way in which it can help us. Firstly, it will tell us who can provide access to the affected cultural heritage site. Secondly, who can finance the first aid of the cultural heritage, who can give permission to begin the first aid of cultural heritage site, who should be consulted and involved at a community level, and who can provide the information required for a context-specific response that is sensitive to the local needs. That is, who would be the resource person who would give us information regarding the site in terms of its historicity as well as in terms of its architectural layout and on. So these informations from the stakeholder map, we can get all these informations. Then it would the next step would be analysis of information involved. And so the analysis of information would involve the following. That is, to identify the cultural heritage assets which are most significant, which are heavily damaged, and have are vulnerable to secondary hazards, leading to risk of further damage of the heritage property if left unattended. An analysis of information would also involve identification of cultural assets requiring on-site damage and risk assessment. It would also involve the consideration of type of expertise, supplies, tool needed, what are the immediate security actions that have to be taken, and preferred language of communication. This is very important because all the agencies or the actors are generally proficient in one or two languages like the English or Hindi. But there are sites wherein these languages are not much spoken. Like if it is a site in Odisha or it is a site in further south, then the preferred language is different. So one has to come into agreement what would be the preferred language and how things could be communicated to the local stakeholders and all the people that are interacting in the team of the first aid group. Then a strategic plan has to be prepared on the following lines. One has to predict the time period, size and scope, cost and objective of the on-site operations. What are the roles and responsibilities of institutions, emergency actors, first aiders, and volunteer groups? What are the permissions that are required? And what are the community-based consultations that have to be done before beginning the on-site assessment, security and stabilization measures? And then a communication plan has to be drawn. So how things has to be communicated to each other while the operation is on. And then preparation and resource required during the on-site work has to be identified. Type of on-site training and or orientation required before doing it has to be identified. And the monitoring regime, as in who would be monitoring it, what will be the time frame when these things would be done. These have to be worked out. Then comes the second step. You remember we have talked about 4 steps in the beginning for immediate response. We were talking about the preparation part in the first section. Let me go to the first slide and show you. So the situation analysis is the first step. We were talking about this. Now we come to the second step. And the second step is on-site damage and risk assessment. So it allows identification and recording of damage caused and risk posed to cultural heritage in the aftermath of the disaster. So it provides the opportunity to assess the physical nature of the affected heritage site, to identify immediate risks and estimate specific site-specific costs for security and stabilization actions and full recovery. So this is some kind of a workflow chart which talks about the stages at which this on-site damage and risk assessment should be done. So it involves preparation, inspection of the site, record of damage and effect of the record of the damage and the effects of the disaster, access and record to immediate risks, compilation and analysis of the data, preparation of an assessment report, and update plan for on-site actions. Under preparation, we are further going into further explanation of these stages. So first step is preparation. So under preparation, we need to obtain permission and contacts. We have to prepare a team, and then we have to have pre-event data, which involves gathering of a map which indicates the geocoordinate of the affected cultural heritage site, the site map or the latest satellite image, Where applicable, we have to collect floor plans or otherwise prepare a sketch plan of the site. We have to have site-based inventories describing the type, number, and location of buildings that are there, or the objects inside the buildings that are there, and the intangible elements that are associated with the site. And then we have to also gather pre-disaster photos so as to understand the kind of damage that the building has gone through, or the structure has gone through, or the site has gone through when we visit the site. So we have to have pre-disaster photos of all the affected buildings or the sites or the objects or the intangible heritage that is there in the site. Then we have to gather tools and equipments. We have to plan the logistics and means of communication, and then overall coordination and plan. Then the next step is inspection of the site. So for inspection of the site, we have to mark the access point of the site first, identify, mark, and if necessary, prepare a safe route to the site. So when the site is suffering when has suffered a kind of disaster, so there could be various points which are susceptible to further accidents. So before entering such kind of an area, one needs to know what are the points which are safe, and then connecting the dots and creating a route map which will allow you to enter as well as come out of the site safe, being safe. So that plan has to be prepared first before one enters the site. Then if there is visible damage to a building, one needs to consult a structural engineer. So if it is, one has to determine that it is safe to enter, mark, if it is safe to enter this area, and also inside the structure, in consultation with the structural engineer, one has to prepare a safe internal access route on the floor plan. If the floor plan is not there, of course, one has to take help of sketch. Then one also needs to identify the mean structural elements, which means to say one needs to know the load distribution system, so that when you are entering the structure, you know what kind of what are the dynamics of the structure. So entering a particular point in the structure will make you susceptible to accidents or not. So you need to understand the entire structural element, entire load distributing system, which involves the structural elements. Then with the help of the local emergency manager, one has to identify safe work and storage space, so that whatever you are retrieving or getting, that has to be kept somewhere under safety, which could be in or around the site, and that the volunteers and the first aiders can use this site to keep this structure, keep these elements retrieved. Then one needs to identify and record damage to basic services and infrastructure. For instance, the electricity, or if there is a plumbing layout, or if there is other sewage layout, and all these things have to be, all these things that are there has to be checked, and one has to record the damage, so that one knows what are the limit of infrastructural damage that the site has gone through or experienced. Then find out if the site has external or unwanted debris or hazardous waste or chemicals that require disposal. So there are at times there are situations that due to the disaster, especially in earthquake or flood, certain disaster hazardous chemicals or waste gets spilled. So it is important to mark these locations and take the help of specialized professionals who are trained to manage these debris and waste that come out of such that come out when spillage happens in such a situation. If the site has broken building parts or fragments of decorative elements, these should also be salvaged, and from where it has been salvaged has to be marked on the site plan, so that in future when restoration and conservation is happening, one can use these elements again for restoration. Then record damage and effect of the disaster. In this, one has to record damage to immovable heritage like buildings and structures. Also record damage caused to cultural heritage objects and collections like artifacts and antiquities. And also record effects of disaster on intangible heritage like culture and people residing around and their lifestyle, occupational pattern, all these things. If there is so due to disaster, is there a possibility that a particular group would move away from what if the surrounding and go somewhere and their livelihood would be affected? So all these things have also are needed to be recorded. And access and then assess and record immediate risks. So here one needs to understand that there is a primary hazard. For instance, there is an earthquake, and there is a secondary hazard which is a cause or causal effect of the primary hazard that has happened. So, for example, if there is an earthquake, there is a possibility that for fire due to short circuit or some other activities, fire can take place, or landslide can happen, or tsunami can happen. So, so these things. So there is a one has to understand that primary hazard is something that has already happened, but there is a possibility of secondary hazards. So the team or the first aider has to be prepared, and also they have to assess if there is a possibility or not, and if there is a possibility, how they can be controlled or how the damage can be reduced or minimized, or and what are the preparation that has to be taken to stop that. Then if there is a flood, again landslide or efflorescence or corrosion, these things happen. Tsunami, it could lead to fire or flood. So there's a list of these are the list of natural hazards and human-induced hazards, which has its further rippling effect in the form of secondary hazards. For example, in warfare, like in a war, the secondary hazard would be bombardment, demolition, fire. In terror, there could be fire, bombardment. In vandalism, there could be theft. So these things are there. This is an example of such the relationship between a primary and a secondary hazard. For instance, if in this diagram, there's a heavy rainfall, and this is the heritage site. So the heavy rainfall would cause localized flooding and power outage. What are the vulnerabilities? So if it's a museum and if it is located in a low-lying area, storage for organic collections like paper or wooden material, they are generally kept in basements. So these artifacts, these objects might get destroyed or damaged due to the secondary hazards. So one has to be prepared. So if there is a heavy rainfall, immediately the site manager or the first aiders should keep this thing in mind and take immediate action for its retrieving and its protection. So as it says, that likely effects on heritage and people could be that museum basement would be flooded, organic objects would get wet, and evacuation of staff and visitors delayed due to submerged roads. Power outage would prevent the opening of electronically operated doors and windows. Communication and emergency response would be hampered, and long-term power outage would also cause molds to grow and damage the wet collections. So basically, there could be organic effects. There could be man-made effects. There could be infrastructural failure, and there would be a lot of these issues due to the secondary hazards that would come into play due to the primary hazard. The next step in the and the next stage in the second step is compilation of data, which means systematically digitization and digitization of the assessment forms and sketches of each type of heritage. Each heritage components and assets should be easily identifiable through unique identification numbers. So when you are preparing the list or when you are preparing the inventory, each object should be first the inventory of each object should be made. There should be a proper form in which there could be sketches also, and an identification number should be given so that to the form as well as on the object, so that later on when the restoration work is done, one notes the details of that object by referring to the this assessment form. Then for interviews with stakeholders, one needs to gather notes or transcripts of interviews and store them together with other data. And the information, one needs to mention the source of information. There has to be a date given when the interview or the source is obtained, and if possible, way of contacting the interviewee has to be also mentioned. Then the photographs have to be downloaded and it has to be linked. It has to be numbered and those numbers should have some kind of methodology by which they can be identified with the object. So the object and the reference number in the form and the number of the photograph should have a unique system of linking effect, so that all the three, like the form, the image, and the object, can be identified by reading those numbers or reference numbers. Then one needs to connect the data contained in the assessment form to the site map, floor plan, photographs of the damage, photograph of the damaged part by compiling a unique file. So all these things should be kept in a single file. The information should be kept in a single file. Basically, what is being said is a system has to be created in which everything can be related to each other. Also, the documentation part as well as the on-site condition can be related through this compilation of information. And they have to be done in systematic way. They have to be done in a scientific way, where numbers and nomenclatures play an important role, and they give direct indication to which place, which object, which photograph, which inventory is being talked about. Then preparation of assessment report. So based on the site survey, one has to prepare a consolidated assessment report, which would include significance of the heritage site affected, nature of disaster or conflict, that is what happened, when it happened, how did it involve cultural heritage. So these informations have to be there. Effects of disaster to building and immovable heritage and intangible heritage has to be mentioned. This should include type of damage, location with reference to base map, floor, and sketch plan that we have already prepared in the collection of data that we spoke about just in the previous slide, and possible causes. Then for intangible heritage, description could include the details of which aspect of the life that has been affected. For instance, is it the knowledge system that has been affected, or is it the craftsmanship that has been affected, or is it the livelihood or the occupational pattern that has got affected? So these things have to be properly mentioned. So and if there is losses, whether it is in terms of life, or whether it is in terms of income, or is it in terms of infrastructure, and the long-term negative effects of such losses have to be mentioned. risk assessment based on identification of hazards, vulnerabilities, and the consequent risks to different types of heritage assets have to be mentioned. Immediate on-site security and stabilization action needed for each type of heritage, whether it is built, whether it is natural, site-specific, or whether it is intangible heritage. What would be the immediate on-site security and stabilization action that have to be identified and mentioned in the report. Resources required for security and stabilization effect of heritage assets, along with a definite and defined timeline, has to be mentioned. Then update plan for implementing on-site action has to be there. So a consolidated damage and risk assessment report can be used to elaborate the plan for implementing the on-site security and stabilization actions identified during the situation analysis. It is particularly helpful for prioritizing the site-specific actions. Now we come to the third step. So the third step includes security and stabilization. Security and stabilization includes actions that help to contain the damage, reduce the risk, taking affected heritage one step closer to recovery. So in this stage, the action for tangible and intangible heritage vary. So of course, which means to say, because intangible aspects are a complex situation, so probably in the first go, when the first aid is happening, security and stabilization of the intangible heritage would not be that proper, could be done properly or that in a holistic way, but later it has to be kept for further interventions on a holistic way and in a later date, because immediate security and stabilization for intangible aspects would not be probably possible when the first aid is being done. So because these are, as the next point says, that these are temporary in nature. So security and stabilization is just for momentary action, so that when so that the structure or the heritage is secure till the time when proper conservation methods or approaches or actions are taken. So this is just a what we can say, a kind of protection till the time further action is taken. And so it is intended to provide adequate support to the damaged heritage during an emergency until it is possible for full conservation treatment to take place. So basic security and stabilization action includes erecting a fence around the affected site or collection, providing temporary cover for exposed build elements, fragments, and objects, post-event evacuation of cultural heritage objects to another safer and temporary location, salvage of cultural heritage collections, built fragments, and decorations. This action includes sorting, stabilization through surface cleaning, and or drying objects. Then providing safe and secure and temporary storage for evacuated and salvaged cultural heritage materials, and drying of building or structure in the aftermath of a flood, and shoring of walls and other load-bearing structural elements in order to provide temporary support. Steps to be taken to implement security and stabilization action for movable and immovable heritage are such. They involve erection of safety barriers, checking of utilities or utilitarian facilities that are there, post or install signage, create safety and secure pathways for exits and entries, provide temporary cover, remove hazardous waste, and ensure that waste structures and surfaces are thoroughly dried out, which prevents distortion or rotting of organic elements like wood, fiber, even for that matter, mud. So so further damage of these organic elements, then prevent cracks in plaster and growth of microbioorganisms like fungus, algae, mold, prevention of scaling and salt migration. So post-event evacuation, when the building is unsafe, this chart shows how it has to be done. So it would again be done with the help of documentation, communication, coordination through risk management. First, permission to enter or to work, then prepare prepare everything that requires to be done prior to intervention, then retrieve the object that is being evacuated. After retrieving, it has to be packed and moved. Then it has to be relocated into a safe place. A report has to be prepared involving all the actions that have taken place, and then further monitor the evacuated objects till the time proper restoration and relocation is done of these objects. The first thing was of evacuation. The second is of salvaging. How do we salvage it? Salvaging also involves first permission, prepare, retrieve, triage, stabilize, pack and move, relocate, report, and monitor. So the stages, the steps are similar. And then comes stabilization. For stabilization, so what did we do? First evacuation, then salvage, and then stabilization. So in stabilization, again, we need to prepare, document, execute, report, and monitor. So there are certain guidelines which are there in risk, in the first aid that we gave. These guidelines are that this action should be people-centered. It should be an inclusive attitude, respecting the diversity of the place, and it should be context-specific response. For instance, in people-centered, one has to see that prioritizing people's need and enhancing their ability to secure and recover their own heritage is integral to the design and approach of the first aid program or first aid framework. By being inclusive, it means that first aid should embrace an inclusive outlook to assist in the recognition of elements that constitute the cultural heritage of the disaster-affected area. So all the elements have to be considered, and not particular elements of preference should be identified in retrieving or safeguarding. And context-specific response means understanding the wider emergency context. Understanding the wider emergency context is crucial for providing effective cultural heritage or first aid. For instance, if we are going in a site, if we are intervening in a site, so it is not only site-specific job. Our actions would involve the overall catchment of that place, wherein all the stakeholders residing there are involved, not only stakeholders but also the elements of heritage. For instance, if it is a environmentally sensitive zone, then our first aid approach should be equipped. Our approach should be such that it does not hamper in any way the sensitivity of that place or the location. It should interlock culture with humanitarian assistance. So the first aid to cultural heritage should be provided in connection with humanitarian relief and recovery. So one should also keep in mind that it's not only about the heritage resources, it is also about the people who are living there. So humanitarian relief and recovery work should also be done in tandem with, if not before, the recovery of or the safeguarding or first aid of the cultural heritage. And do no harm. This is one of the most important principles. it says that first aid action should prevent further damage and promote recovery. So your action should not cause further damage to the heritage, but it should stop the further damage of the heritage. Next is who can give permission to initiate response. The emergency management laws of the country play a large role in determining who or which agency has the overall authority to initiate response action and provide access to affected area. In India, the NDMA or National Disaster Management Authority coordinates the response to all natural and man-made disasters under the 2005 National Disaster Management Act. Then who can plan and implement the response? A cultural first aider can plan and implement first aid operations in coordination with the emergency responders, humanitarian professionals, heritage owners, and volunteers. That chart that we have shown earlier, in which the principal nodal agency, NDMA, the owner or the religious organization, the local people, and the heritage experts, all these play an important part, and they, in collaboration with each other, can initiate this work. A cultural first aider is someone who has received prior training in safeguarding endangered cultural heritage during or immediately after an emergency. So he has to be trained, which means to say he has to be he has already received some kind of training in and has done such kind of work in safeguarding endangered cultural heritage during or immediately after an emergency. So he has to be resourceful, people focused, and action oriented. By saying resourceful, it means that he should he understands the diverse form of cultural heritage, has the knowledge of the emergency context, and has strong analytical and critical skills. By saying people focused, it means he should be an active listener, understand and respect existing social structures, beliefs, and values. So when you are intervening in a temple or a mosque or a church or any such sensitive areas, he should understand and the belief system, the values, and existing social structure, and should not try to impose his understanding, but understand their understanding and work accordingly, so that there is no conflict when the first aid operation is ongoing. He should be a team player. He should be sensitive to human needs, and he should be capable of building trust. And act by action oriented. By saying action, what it means is that he should be positive, and he should be having a can-do attitude. That is, it can be done. Nothing is impossible. That kind of attitude. That doesn't mean he would go out of the way and bringing. Making like he should not go do something that would affect the team and put the life at risk. But of course, that what it means to say is that for saving the heritage, there should be a positive attitude that things can be done. Then he should be a creative problem solver. So everything is not standard done by following standards. There are occasions where instincts have to be brought into play, and he should be creative and keeping the situation and the context and the available resources in mind in solving problems. He should be a quick thinker, and of course he should have a proper physical stamina to endure such kind of situations. So when is it appropriate to provide cultural heritage first aid? It is very subjective and contextual depending on the kind of emergency situation that is there. So therefore it varies and depends on the following factors. It depends on the nature and the scale of emergency. For example, in case of a major or a complex emergency involving extensive damage and loss of life, first aid operation might be delayed, because here life and life and property and is at risk, and there are various other situations which are involved. So probably heritage, first aid to heritage can be delayed a bit, and first the infrastructural aspects and the life loss aspects have to be kept in mind. Then it also depends upon the access to the affected area. For example, in the event of an armed conflict or a nuclear incident, access to affected area will be severely limited, which may in turn delay the activation of first aid. Then the scale of damage caused to cultural heritage and or its significance for stakeholders. Example, it's for example, local, national, international significance. So it depends on also the significance and the scale of damage, that is significance of the heritage structure and the scale of the damage that is caused due to the heritage or due to the disaster. These things have to be kept in mind. Then also local capacity and preparedness for intervention has also have to be kept in mind before deciding the appropriate time for intervention. So early recovery is the last part, and it means that cultural heritage first aid is only successful if followed by conservation efforts to restore function and access. Thus, once you have implemented first aid for the damaged cultural heritage, documented the entire process, and set up the monitoring routine, the next step is to prepare a consensus-driven action plan for recovery and rehabilitation, which involves detailed condition assessment, conservation treatments, including repair and restoration for tangible heritage, risk mitigation, restoration of livelihoods and services, improved and altered use of cultural heritage, following the principles of sustainable development, and the concept of build back better. So after the retrieving and everything is done, for early recovery and rehabilitation, a conscious-driven attitude has to be taken, wherein all the participants and all the stakeholders and all the heritage components and all the communities or the stakeholders have to be brought together, and keeping one has to think about the principle of sustainable development, and keeping that in mind, one has to prepare the conservation process. So the following section outlines action that could be taken in early recovery phase, that is post first aid situation analysis, condition assessment, development of mechanisms for coordination, participation, and capacity building, evaluation of the use, function, and meaning of cultural heritage, gather resources, and then implement the plan, the program. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I hope this presentation has been understood properly, and I have been able to give you the rough outline of how immediate response should be given. Unfortunately, I'll be not be able to be present when this lecture is going to happen. For that, if any query that you have regarding this lecture, you can write to me. The mail address is there with the coordinator of this lecture. And further, if there is a question, either the coordinator can answer your queries, or you can write to me, mail me. I will be responding to it. Thank you.
We are very grateful for Mr. Ruknuddin Mirza for his wonderful lecture, which really put a light on how the immediate response to disasters in cultural heritage sites should be. And he gave a very detailed overview of all these things. I hope it was clear. But even if you have any doubts, I will encourage you to please write to us right now also in the chat box, or otherwise you can write to us later. Or even tomorrow we can handle these queries. So please share your doubts with us, whatever it is. And so moving on, we have Mr. Pranranjan Prasad. Whoever joined yesterday, you must have heard him yesterday talking about his experience, talking about his vast experience in this field. And he has been the former former chief security officer of Archaeological Survey of India, and he used to be in he used to serve Indian Army before that. And so I will invite Mr. Pranranjan Prasad again today to speak a little bit more about immediate response and his other views on the disaster management, basically. So I will share his presentation with you here. Hello, Mr. Pranranjan Prasad.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. So I'll just share your presentation.
Okay.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
All right. Could you please start with the presentation? Thank you.
Yeah. Now, this is about disaster response planning for museums. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay. Can you just okay. Where is it gone? Okay, fine. So just now, Mr. Mirza gave the presentation in a very elaborate and excellent way. It is to be appreciated. And here, I will just touch upon the salient points or the major points for people to understand. Okay. Now, the thing is that whenever one has to deal with these subjects, the person himself should be so passionate and involved and engrossed in this subject that the best comes out of him. So why do we plan against any disaster for museums? It is for the safety of museums, collections, visitors, and the staff working over there. All these should be safe. And when I say safety of museum collection, that includes even the building and the workplace. Yeah, next please. Yeah. Now, what is the requirement? Requirement for any disaster management is actually from preparedness to rehabilitation. This is the total journey of disaster response mitigation process. Preparedness, obviously, you prepare yourself well before by way of personnel training, equipment, desired equipment, then how to handle these equipments and what to be done when under various circumstances. So these are the requirement. That will fall under the ambit of preparedness. And then if suppose something has happened, then the team responsible for relief swings into action. say for example NDRF or any other, even local or anybody. Like number of times one comes to know that local boy jumped into the river and brought back the drowning person safe. So all these will fall under the rescue operation heading. So in this course of rescue, sometimes, like in a big catastrophe, like something happened a couple of years earlier in Kerala. It was lashed very badly by flood and rain and all that. Even at other places, what happens is rescue team goes, picks up few people to safety and brings them to a safer place, which is a temporary shelter, temporary camp sort of thing. But in this process, what happens is that the members of the family do not come in the same camp. Some people are in one camp, the other is in different, and people are frightened at what has happened to my brother, what has happened to my husband, what has happened to my wife, and things like that. So again, here, a very important thing is dissemination of information, immediate information. In this, a TV screen may be put up here at the relief centers to show that so-and-so is there. If a voice message is sent that is Mr. So-and-so is there, is so-and-so is there, and this is how to connect. Because under these conditions of devastation, psychological problem comes to the fore. Even after rehabilitation process, there are many people who are so badly shaken up psychologically that it is very difficult for them to come to the normal life. It takes time for them to be normal. So these are all parts of any relief exercise. Then is rehabilitation. What is rehabilitation? Rehabilitation means, suppose people have lost their houses, even the ground on which their houses were there, that has been swept away. So now district administration and concerned department and ministries have to see that they are allocated proper place, given some grant or in whatever best method, their houses come up in a reasonable time. Then these days, we are living in a world of card. Card, when I say not the playing card, but the cards which you have in your wallet and pocket. Hardly anybody has enough money in their wallet, but there it will be full of various cards. This card, this bank card, this ATM, this driving license, and all these things. So maybe some people may lose them. And then their life comes to a standstill, or rather becomes very difficult till the time they are reissued to them, like for ATM card, driving license, whatever. You know, every card is very important. Is there this Aadhaar card? So much so that double dose, have you taken or not, is more important than all the cards. Double dose of vaccination. So all these things have to be taken into account. So disaster is not about only one monument or one museum falling down or artifacts being lost, but it has a wider, canopy. So it is from preparedness to rehabilitation. Even in the museum building, if it has to be reconstructed, reset up, and all these things will have to be placed. Thank you. Next. Yeah. Now, this photograph, I think most of the people would know. This is of Notre Dame Museum, which got burnt and gutted totally. But they have rebuilt it and rebuilt They have reconstructed, rebuilt it in the same manner, fashion, and shape and size as it was earlier. This is the greatness of that country. Record time. Anyway, so what are the anticipated problems? Now, whatever I am letting you know is an overview. This is not the full text. This is overview. So anticipated problems may be through natural calamity. Those natural calamity which may hit you without any warning. And there are some which may come, you can't stop them, but early warning does come to you. So the seismic zones have been plotted on a map. Map gives a exact position that your position is in which seismic zone. Like we are in Delhi, I am in Delhi. Delhi is in seismic zone 4. So whatever problems is envisaged is being considered. Accordingly, the building must be designed against those threats. Then high velocity wind, wherever it comes. This is just a universal point, but it will not be effective everywhere. So wherever there is a high velocity wind, mainly on the coastline, and incessant rain, fire, these will fall under natural calamity. Of course, fire is both ways. It is if a fire erupts in a building, that's not natural. But if a fire erupts after tsunami or earthquake or something, then it will fall in natural calamity category. Then other problems are mishandling the objects and carelessness while handling it, while taking from one gallery to another, or taking it for restoration, for conservation, for chemical treatment. There should not be carelessness at all. It should not fall down, it should not hit the wall or something like that so that it gets damaged. So staff and officials responsible for taking care at that point of time must be very, very careful. Other problem may come up, that an intended human action, as I have already explained to you yesterday, that some scoundrel just picked up some artifact and pocketed a small size and pocketed it and went out of the museum. However, he was apprehended and the object was brought back. Then monkey and bird. Now monkey, it may sound very odd, but incidentally, here in Delhi, the area where National Museum is located, that entire area of Nirman Bhavan, Udyog Bhavan, Sena Bhavan, South Block, North Block, all these places have been infested by monkey. And monkeys, they create so much of problem that you have to be alert and keep them at bay to the extent these security guards can. Another thing is that in a couple of years, National Museum is going to be relocated, or rather shifted. All the objects are going to be shifted in North Block and South Block premises. There somebody said that just now, that those areas should also be well sanitized from disaster point of view. Very true, very correct. Because I have been visiting these North Block and South Block on official purposes. And I think people don't know that their basements are full of bats. I mean, it's a bats done. And those basements are not under any use, but they are full of bats. I don't know what would be done, because I am not expert on this taking care of these things. But then it has to be, bats have to be sent out of those basements. So this is how, I mean, what Mr. Mirza said, that you have to first know and understand the problems which you are going to face. So again, birds, what they do, at their chosen time, they try to find a suitable place for making nest. And invariably, high-rise buildings, like any museum and all, their skylight and such places are very good for them. So they come and they do all this thing. And sometimes you find them dead also there, and they are stuck. So that has to be taken care of and removed from that place. I know of case in Sarnath Museum many years ago. Fire brigade had to be called because nobody had a high ladder to reach that place. So I'm just giving you these things, that what one may face, the problem or situation. And there's nothing known as problem in my dictionary. If you know the job, it's not a problem because you have the solution. So I work on that premise. Now, riots, arson, and looting by antisocial elements, then war-like situation, all these are anticipated problems. Now, close air fly past on Republic Day on Rajpath creates, shakes National Museum and Modern Art Gallery very badly. I have been there. I was, at that point of time, I was inside the building. So these all are to be anticipated well in advance. Yeah, thanks. Next one. Yeah. Now here, what should be our aim? Aim should be to understand the risks involved in the museums, or in simple words, what are the factors which may affect museums adversely, and to work through various methods towards their solution. So aim is very simple. Find out what is what, and understand and do it what is to be done. Okay, thank you. Next. Yeah, essential. What are the essential things for museums? One is proper signages. You know, people come to the museum, or the visitors come to the museum from world over, all across. So from different countries. So if we can provide signages in English and Hindi, definitely yes. And even after understanding that how many visitors come from which country and all, even that those can be put, or rather some sort of guide headphone is given through which they can listen. Where this system is there in National Museum and perhaps in other museums also. So this goes a long way in smooth flow of visitors. This is not for the staff, this is for the visitors. If signages can direct them to proper place, either written signages on the board, very well placed, or else through voice. with a headphone given to them. Now, floating visitors to be guided properly. And of course, with the signages, they will be guided very properly. And floating, when you say, means visitors come and go. I mean, some visitor may come only once in a particular museum in their lifetime. Then emergency exit are there everywhere in such a public place, like even in cinema hall. There are a number of exit doors which are not kept open normally, but they are for emergency. They are emergency exit doors. So somebody raised this point yesterday, and I'm very happy that what happens when emergency exits are not opened, or rather closed, and on emergency situation also it remains closed. And what happens? So system should be foolproof. Doors should open during emergency, and that is how emergency exit must work. And I stressed on a point that the days of lock and key are gone. Now key has been replaced by other methods of opening the door. So always try and get these items fixed, which is of latest value, not latest edition, but latest value. So this is how emergency exit is a very important point to be discussed and operated upon during hours of crisis. Okay, thank you. Next. Yeah. What are the factors for taking care against disaster? One is location, geographical, land, hill, river, jungle. I mean, location of the museum. Now, I have earlier also said that there are very many museums which have been opened in forts and old buildings, heritage buildings and all, which may not meet the requirement of being a proper, which may not meet proper requirement of a museum building. So what do we do there? There, some remedial measure or something should be assessed, and if at all still that is not fit, then some new building must be constructed. So when you construct this location factor is actually for the new building to museum building. So geographically it must be seen, and a lot of emphasis must go into this. Then case study. Case study of any mishappenings at any of the museums in the world would help in designing your own system in preventing such occurrences, at least in your museum where you are. So case study must be seriously done, carried out, understand, and pick up the best points which may be of your use. Now, designing and construction. Of course, this is for the other team who are experts in designing and construction, and architects are there to suggest it. So, but it is very much, if designing and construction is good, then half the battle is won. Generally, what is seen that people are very happy. I mean, any organization, any constructing basement, somehow I feel it the other way. Basement should never be constructed in any of the museum buildings. Reason, many problems crop out from there. If any object is kept there as a, reserve collection or something, nobody goes there and cleans it, and I mean, these are the practical problems I am talking about. So, of course, architects and engineers may differ with me very strongly, but after construction, after beautiful construction, their use is not good. These places create a lot of problems, waterlogging and such problems. And we have got the sky. Sky is the limit. Why should we go down the Mother Earth? Why can't we have one floor more or something, or spread more of the building? Anyway, this I leave it to for the experts to understand. But my problem is after construction, what we face. So, anyway. Now, next is safety and security considerations. Of course, safety and security is a different chapter. There's a lecture of mine and PPT, which can give you very, very elaborate understanding of how and what type of gate should be there, who should operate it, when should it be operational, and then checking their operational capability, doors, windows, etc. All these things, like somebody must be designated to switch on the light at the first evening after sunset. And then the responsibility should be there to switch the light off in the morning. But tell me frankly, have you seen this happening everywhere and every time? Perhaps not. Why? Because the person may not be on duty in the morning for any good reason. And the other person doesn't know that he has to take over his duty. So all these are very small things, but very important factors. Now, area around the museum, outside area I'm talking of, and also inside, should be well lit. There should be no dark spots anywhere. So lighting should be done accordingly. Now, ease of functioning by all the branches. All the branches must have good working space. So they should not be cramped. That is how the building must be constructed, designed and constructed. Now, medical care for staff and visitors. Of course, just putting one, first aid box doesn't mean anything, unless there are enough number of proper medicine and other items which are required with a proper staff who knows it. I mean, for first aid, you need not employ any hospital doctor, nurse, or compounder, but certainly some proper training can be given to the staff through Red Cross or any such agency who should be around. That if somebody needs some medical care, then fire preventive mechanism should be there, checked and operational all the time. And any new unforeseen problems, the factors to deal with the problem should also be there. So this is how, this is not the full text. One can always keep on adding. And medical care for, then what do you say, wheelchair in desired number for the visitors with a proper person trained to how to operate it, because there is a system of operating wheelchair. If you are coming down the slope, then the person should be brought back on a reverse side. He should be looking upward and the wheelchair must come down. must be brought down slowly. So all these things are there. Every work has to be taken under a proper training. Proper training is desired to function. Then another factor is which generally at some places it misses out. Very good public conveniences, or rather restroom as we call it these days, should be there. Very ideal, world class standard of these restrooms should be there with proper persons to taking care of it for male and female separately. So then baby care room is also desirable in museums. These days, a lot of emphasis is being given on these things, and also for differently abled people. Differently abled people must be taken care of to go around the museum. Next, please. Yeah. This I will run through very quickly because there should be, what are the agencies who should be involved? Expert management group is desired by selecting people who have the passion and who can really guide.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Prasad. Could you please wrap up in 2 minutes?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
I'll do that. So now, good construction company, well-trained safety and security task force with inadequate strength, electrical department for ensuring uninterrupted power supply, hospitals for immediate medical care, nearby hospitals, their telephone numbers and all should be available. Now, PhD, plumbers, fire, NDRF, these all should be on call. Housekeeping staff. Okay, next, please. Okay, necessity. The main thing in necessity is SOP, the standard operating procedure, and rest about training and equipment. Thank you. Next. Forest fire. Just I am mentioning this if any museum is around any such forested area. Thank you. Next. Yeah, mock drill. Mock drill is very important. In this mock drill, what you do, everybody comes to know about his role and the time is curtailed in dealing with the situation. Thank you. Next. Meaning of loss belonging to abhor in life, ensure minimum adverse effect by good preparation, bring back normalcy by rehabilitation as per degree of destruction. Thank you. Next. Okay. All success lies on thinking ahead, means pre-planning. So training and anticipation is required. Thank you. Next. Okay. For everybody, be the best and feel the success. Thank you. Anybody has any questions, please?
Thank you so much, Mr. Prananjan Prasad, for such an enlightening lecture. I request participants to please let us know if you have any doubts. We don't have much time though, but we'll try and solve it quickly. If you have any comments on the sessions today, even that would be great to know. Okay. I don't think there are any questions or comments. Thank you so much, Mr. Prananjan Prasad, for your time today again. It was really our honor to have you in this event, and we're really grateful to you. Thank you.
Learning should be put into practice. This should be the aim of this workshop.
Yeah, true.
Okay.
So I'll request Mr. Ali Haider to take over, please. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Captain Ranjan Prasad sir, for his deliberation. Now, I would like to invite Professor Santosh Kumar sir, who is the head of governance and inclusive DRR at National Institute of Disaster Management, for his concluding remarks for the day and to focus on the theme of this program, that is the disaster risk reduction of museums. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, and Intech, our partner, and Ram, and all the delegates who have joined today and given me this opportunity. Interestingly, I was listening to Mr. Prananjan Prasad this presentation, and also learned that what was deliberated yesterday. Actually, when we look at this as a kind of a context, like when we talk about museum, the heritage, and I remember when I was looking into the Gujarat earthquake, post-disaster long-term recovery and reconstruction. There we found that large number of monumental this structure got damaged. So that was one concern which came into, and Intech was very part of it during that disaster. That how to actually revive, that was the biggest challenge. And that also gave us the learning that how to protect in ex-ante situation, like pre-disaster planning, what we can do for protecting such kind of a heritage building. So that was the biggest learning came after the Gujarat earthquake. Maybe Intech must be having many such kind of instances in the past also, like in 1999, super cyclone Orissa happened, then before that Latur earthquake happened, then also that we said that Uttarkasi, Chamoli and all. Over the years and the recent what we had like Nepal earthquake, the whole city is as a kind of a heritage city type. And there the structure, especially to the old city. And the whole structure, people go Darbar House, if you go there, and then you can find this kind of a structure. And when disaster happened, it collapsed, totally collapsed. So now, today they do not have many such kind of monumental, or heritage buildings got damaged. The third thing which I would like to mention about that any flood-prone area or many of the cyclonic storms were taking place, and in the coastal area, what kind of a heritage site which we have other than the museum, and so that can be protected. Like I remember Iran, then the bomb earthquake took place, and then that became devastating for the whole of the country. So the bomb earthquake itself was the land where the people used to go and see the heritage. The city evolved over the years, and thousands of years of history got carried. And that is why all these heritage buildings are declared. The other day, like NIDM had a program in Gujarat, and that time old Ahmedabad city got declared as a kind of a heritage city. And if you see the buildings and the designs and the structures, if you go inside the building, you will find a different kind of a scenario altogether. So the point which is coming as that why these structures are getting. Then the question, can we do a backward planning for that? And that backward planning is that one, the infrastructure, number one. The second is that when we were doing the damage and loss assessment of that affected areas, it was very difficult to make an assessment. Like normally, as an economist, what we do, that we do as an assessment under any building which we see and go for the replacement cost value at the current price level. So replacement cost, you can create that building which was there in the current price is say 10 lakhs and 20 lakhs. But the heritage, the moment we say heritage, or whether we say as a kind of our जो धरोहर की बात करते हैं. So if that has to be brought into the monitoring, monetizing those, it's very difficult to monetize. So you can't monetize even a smallest of the piece, like a small statue kept in the museum. And if that gets damaged, so then we do not have anything, just we can say sorry to the people that yes, we had kept this and it happened because of the disaster where we did not have any kind of control. So it happened and we could not protect our heritage. This is a simple argument which we can give. This. What interesting is to taking note of all these structures, what are happening in India, what is happening elsewhere, and see how heritage buildings or heritages and the museums are actually taken care of. Whether we can see museum as a kind of a priceless commodity of that particular district, state, and the country, number one. And are they protected in the kind of event of natural calamities, which we say the calamities, and these calamities are changing its profile now. So profile is that heavy cloud burst which is happening all over. Then we are saying that heat is generating as a urban heat island. The third is that he was telling about the forest fire. The forest fire is there. I said that the biggest thief, like normally we go to the museum and the surveillance system is there for protecting from the thief, like anybody can go and can have an intention of stealing something. That can be protected by the surveillance. But the larger thief, I can say, that in the form of floods, in the form of cyclone, in this the form of fire, big fire, in the form of earthquakes and also and so forth. They steal the whole of kind of a museum altogether. So they will not, the earthquake will not interested in this X statue, Y statue, or Z. The whole of the museum is highly exposed to such kind of environment. Now, if this is our actually dharohar, then how to go for as a kind of a planned engagement of the ASI or the INTEC or NIDM together to see that try to understand that what is the exposure of this particular heritage, whether it's a heritage site or the heritage building or the museums. So what is the exposure due to various calamities which we are facing, number one. Number two, are we resilient enough so that even if it happens 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, nothing to do and we are totally protected? Is this the case? Then the third is coming as that this kind of structure has a high kind of a value for tourism. So that determines the economic or system of that particular area or particular states. In India, if you go, most of the states are having this heritage buildings, starting from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. And most of the states have the museum also there in their territory. So what kind of engagement we are having with the state government in terms of ASI is the national government body, and how we state museum department also, and we can see that how we can protect together as a suppose expertise protecting museum, that expertise might not be with the NIDM, but INTAC is there and other experts are there. That can come together. NIDM can be provide this the structural safety in terms of exposure, but that structural safety could not be done as we are doing with the other buildings. So it has to be done very, very differently. That's what I referred the Gujarat example, how we struggled, that how the fabric of that originality be maintained with the building. So that is the essence of understanding and appreciating those kind of challenges. So I was telling that these structures is a kind of those who are studying ancient history, there's academic value also. Those who are studying evolution of society, those who are studying that how people used to live in the. So that museum gives the insights. And not only this, there's the stone and bricks and mortars, but also many dastaves, documents which you have in most of the museums, which if you see that other than that also many documents are there. Similarly, I can see in the many of the libraries, which is there, they keep, so how to see in a holistic way the cultural bank, we say the cultural bank of the evolution. So the evolution ka museum is the bank, and the city is the bank. So that deposits are there, and then we have to see the younger generations are coming and trying to look at. So that what we see as a kind of a how that could be visualized as a security plus disaster risk management. I'll tell you one example. When we visited after this earthquake of Nepal, and we were dialoguing with the government of Nepal. That time I was working as the director of the SAR Disaster Management Center. So we had a kind of our Secretary General also accompanied us, and we went to the Planning Commission of Government of Nepal. Government of Nepal, when we were discussing the larger issues, because of the structure in which whether this is structure when the large number of tourists are there, and if certain thing happens as it happened in Kathmandu, they were onto the structure. You all must be knowing it. And it totally collapsed at the time, and it killed more than 200. What I'm saying is this structural safety is also important in the lives of the visitors to the vicinity. So how we can think of protecting those cities with that kind of a vision that it has to be protected for another 100 years of time, and in 100 years of time, what kind of a disasters which we might face. Like with pandemic, we did not know that this will have a severe effect like that, but we can visualize the other risk as well when they're going through the pandemic. Because if you don't interface with any risk, we don't appreciate challenges. So now COVID-19 has definitely touched every human being, every structure, whether in the form of like say visitors, that no visitors we are finding. And so that is why we are tangible or intangible way, everything got affected. So now this is the time to think over and bring out certain strategies for protecting our own environment. And that when we see museum should not be seen alone as a kind of a structure. We should say that what is the local culture, that is also part of the heritage. Heritage is not, we had a discussion with the UN ambassador, Ms. Dea Mirza, on this particular issue. We were discussing, she is a UN brand ambassador. And she was narrating about the story of her own upbringing in the city of Hyderabad. And she was mentioning that how the urban city is now losing its those days kind of a heritage and the form which so this kind of experience everybody has got. If so, like I come from Bodh Gaya. I come a city like Gaya district, which I say that's the oldest city which I can imagine in the form of the city, because it has a long history, but it is also exposed to earthquake. But so far it has not hit by any bigger earthquake. But we know that there is into high risk areas. So can we identify such areas? And we know that these are the zone 5, zone 4 of various kind of a disaster. And start looking at our own infrastructure in terms of heritage and the museum, the culture, and in a holistic manner. And we see that how that can be, what are the exposure of risk of our heritage and the culture of that particular area when disaster strikes. So accordingly, we can go for a strategizing thing and developing ex-ante program plans and all. I don't know how many museums in the country have the disaster management plan. It's like if you have like Louvre Museum, I was going in the France, and you all know that very well designed and very well pursued. I did ask about the management that whether you have a disaster management plan, if such some stampede happens, some evacuation happens, how to be go about that. If large number of people at one place and certain thing happens abruptly, Like somebody is visiting in our own museum and Delhi feels the tremor. And the tremor, then museum is also for the people who are there, and they feel such kind of how you wish to evacuate them and take them to the safer place. So these are the fundamental questions may be addressed when we talk about this preparedness of museum for addressing the disaster exposure and that kind of a challenges which we have. So the structure could be the Hindu temple, could be mosque, could be Buddhist temple, could be Jain temple. Like in the south, you go, lot many Hindu temples are into kind of a like a heritage thing. So what I'm saying is that you know better where the heritage buildings are, where the museums are, what is the value of those museums, what are the value of for our old cultural significance, and how to protect them in the form of like the kind of disasters frequencies and also the intensities are increasing over the years. So in this context, earlier we used to have one disaster in 10 years of time. Now we are having 10 disasters in 1 year of time. So things have changed. Things are changing very fast. And we say that only thing constant is a change. So how that museum is also adapting that change, how that heritage is also adapting to that change, and how we are bringing those challenges in our own planning system and making heritage and the museum resilient to such kind of external forces. So I would stop here. And I know that you all people have deliberated in detail. So my compliment to everyone, and we also learning from your deliberations. And we can think of doing certain activities together. And I would request Intech also to how to guide us in taking up, and we can also have whatever the information which we have. We are developing a module for that training of the museum. We have a guidelines. The National Disaster Authority has a guidelines for that. So we have been deliberating on this subject for long. The only thing that how it should go, we are talking with the Ministry of Culture also. So let's see that how collectively we can influence this as a kind of a to bring them into public policy, and also that institutions which are engaged in management of the heritage. What I'm saying is just not the building, but also the city and also the culture, that to be protected in the context of disasters. So thank you very much once again, and Dr. Ali, thank you very much. My colleague from Intech, and also Pran Rajan, and also we see that Vyankar Kumar is also there. So my greetings to all of you, and my thanks to all of you and all those delegates who are attending this particular important event. I don't know Mr. Ashok is there or not, but I could see that. So I'm grateful indeed for everyone, and over to you, Dr. Ali, at this point of time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your kind words. As I would request all the participants that they can put their questions in the chat box, and we will for sure take up them to the next day, the final day, that is tomorrow. So they can put their questions in the chat box. So as we are running out of time, I would like to conclude the today's session with the vote of thanks. So to place on record, I would like to thank the patron of this 3-day training program on disaster risk reduction of museums, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, the Executive Director of National Institute of Disaster Management. I would like to express my gratitude to convener Professor Santosh Kumar sir, who is the head of GI DRR division at National Institute of Disaster Management, and Dr. Naveen Piplani, who is the Principal Director of Intech Heritage Academy, New Delhi. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the resource persons of today's session, Mr. Ruknuddin Mirza, who is the Assistant Director of Architectural Heritage Division of Intech, Captain Pran Ranjan Prasad, who is the former Chief Security Officer of Archaeological Survey of India, ASI. We are grateful to you both for taking out your precious time for us. And most importantly, to all the respected participants, we are indeed grateful that you have joined today's session. And we hope that we will meet tomorrow also for the last day of this program. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.